Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. We are going to be talking about the books I read in October. I read 9 books. I DNF'd 1 book. So, of course, I don't put them in any kind of order. The first book I read this month was Lotus by Jennifer Hartman. This is a spin-off book to Still Beating. There is a character briefly mentioned in Still Beating that you learn that he was kidnapped when he was like a boy for 20 some years, and he finally escapes, and this is his story. You do get flashbacks to when he was kidnapped, and it is a romance between his childhood best friend, who is also his next door neighbor. You do, when he comes, when he escapes, he goes to live with his brother, who is actually the hero in Jennifer Hartman's newest release, The Stars Are on Our Side, which hopefully I will read in November. It is very high up. It's like near the top, or if not at the top of my next book to read. So I really hope to get to that one soon. But this one is, I still enjoyed Still Beating better, but this is so good. Jennifer Hartman writes such amazing stories and romances and twists. There is so there's a reason that this boy is kidnapped, and it gets a little bit crazy, and then when you learn like the reason behind it, like what really happened, she's like, oh my god, like, are you kidding me? Like, it is so good. Still Beating is still my number 1, but this is just as good. It's high up there on that list. I give this, if you didn't guess, 5 stars. This would be 6 stars as well if I could do that, but highly recommend anything Jennifer Hartman writes. This is only the second book I've read by her, but I own probably about 6 or 7 of her books, and I cannot wait to read all of them. The next book I read was Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. This was actually my second book I read by Riley Sager. The first one I've completed. So I did read years ago when it came out, Final Girls, or I started to read it, and I just wasn't into it at the time. I don't know if it was the book. I don't know if it was just because it wasn't the right time, but I DNF'd that book. And ever since Riley Sager started coming out, I just kind of was staying away. But this one intrigued me because it was about a haunted house. I love horror books and thriller books set in haunted houses, and that is exactly what this is. So we have our heroine is Maggie, right? Maggie, yeah. Growing up, her parents bought this old Victorian home that was supposedly haunted. All these things started happening, and her father started to write a book about the incidents that happened. It made the town infamous, made the house infamous. People are really upset by what it's done to the area. The house gets vandalized and all this stuff, and then her father dies. Her mom, I don't know if she remarries or is with some other guy, but she's off doing whatever. And Maggie gets a call that her father never actually sold the house, and the house is willed to her. And she's like, what do you mean he never sold the house? So she has to go back to this house. They spent maybe a month there. I don't even think they quite made it a month. And she doesn't believe in any of this. She thinks it's all a load of crap. She hates her father's book with a passion. She thinks she was wrongly depicted in it along with other people. So she's a home renovator, home designer, restorer of old homes. So she wants to renovate, restore the home, and then flip it and sell it. But as she's there getting ready to do all of this, strange things start happening, and she starts learning the truth about what happened during that time when she was a child. And we do get flashbacks back and forth between then and now. So it starts to overlap and all come together. I really enjoyed this a lot. So I'm definitely going to definitely going to pick up more Riley Sager in the future. I don't know which books I really want to try, but having enjoyed this one as much as I did, I'm intrigued to try more. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. At first, I really wasn't a fan of the back and forth flashbacks. It was it takes you out of the present story, what's going on. But eventually you start to, because I think the flashbacks are from her father's point of view. Present day is from Maggie's point of view, and then the flashbacks are her father writing the book, or excerpts from the book. So it's from her father's POV. So it was a little bit jarring, but also the parallels were really interesting as the story progressed. Then I read a novella that I got for Stuff Your Kindle Day, and that was Stick Around by Everly Prince. I ended up giving this 2 stars. I honestly can barely remember what it's about. I read this on, again, yeah, Kindle, ebook. It was short. It was like 120 some pages, but it took me forever to read. I just felt like it was dragging out. This is, I believe it's Second Chance, and it's also surprise pregnancy. I'm trying to think. I forget Everly, that's not her name. I don't remember the character names, but our heroine is back in town for whatever reason working at the local hospital, and our hero is a mechanic at the shop in town, and his boss and like dear friend ends up dying, and he's in the hospital and they are thrown back together. They have a run-in at the hospital, and he's kind of like the black sheep of the town that no one likes him, and I don't think it's really like explained why. I think it's more just like her family is like uppity, more of like I don't want to say rich, but like they're higher status, I should say. And he's kind of like, his family is kind of like the low, you know what I mean? Like it's a status, seems like. So everyone hates him. They find out that those two have hooked up again, and like her parents are furious, her brother's furious, like everyone hates it. And then she gets pregnant, and there's that. But we don't even get to see like the pregnancy, them having the baby, like nothing like that. It just kind of like, hey, I'm pregnant, and it's like they figure their shit out then and there. And I was like, I wanted more from it. I think it would have probably been better as a full-length book, but I don't know for sure. So that was the first book I read from Stuff Your Kindle Day, and I was not impressed. And I'm like, oh god, I hope like some of these other, I got like a lot of books. I got like 10 plus books from Stuff Your Kindle, so I'm hoping that I have better luck with the other ones, but I don't know, we'll see. So then I read Pestilence by Laura Thalassa. This is the first book of the Four Horsemen series, so it's the Horsemen of the Apocalypse. I ended up giving this one 3.5, rounded up to 4 stars. It was very much like pretty much it was a road trip, paranormal romance. Our heroine, this is like during the apocalypse, I guess you could say. It's like not completely, like things are starting to happen, like the world's everyone's starting to like there's like mass death and stuff like that. So Pestilence is roaming the earth, spreading his plague and killing everybody in his path. Our heroine is tasked, Sarah, I think her name is, yeah. Our heroine, Sarah, is tasked with killing him. So she almost succeeds, but he's a horseman of the apocalypse. He's a thing from God, so he can't actually die, which she learns the hard way after she like tries to burn him. He can feel pain and he can experience pain, but he can't actually die. He just has to, it just takes a few hours or a couple days for him to regenerate. So when he regenerates, he kidnaps her and he wants to make her suffer. So he literally is dragging her behind his horse as he like travels. I think he's up in like Canada or something. And gradually, you know, they start to warm up to each other. They start to have conversations. There's a lot of caretaking in this because he underestimates, or I should say overestimates, her like ability to cope with things like the elements and like pain and stuff like that. So there's caretaking, actually on both ends, because he also experiences some stuff where she's like has to care for him. So that's pretty much what this is. It was fun. I enjoyed it. I wanted, I guess, a little bit more to happen, but at the end does set up for war, which the one I'm most curious about, which I mentioned in the reading vlog I did for this, was death. But now that I finally did start this quartet, I can finally move, you know, once it's started, I can progress easier through it. All right, then I got the audio for book 4 of the Timothy Blake series by Jack Heath, which is Headcase. Notice there's quite a few like not romance stuff on my reading list for October. That's because it's spooky season, and I'm usually into like thriller horror stuff for spooky season. So Headcase I guess you could consider a thriller. It's again, book 4. This is the series I will not stop shutting up about. It's about the cannibal who works for the FBI. That's how I explain it to people, and they just kind of like look at me like, what are you reading? It's fun. It's fun. I promise. Just please read it. I will not shut up about it. I will not stop saying that. Please give it a try. So this is book 4. I'm hoping there's more. I know this came out in like 2022, but I think it's pretty much, I think it's done because the way it ends, I think this is the last book of it. But it wouldn't surprise me if something else pops up because there's a little bit of at the end, there's like a little bit of something you're like, oh, maybe there is another book. But this one, so each one is kind of like our guy Timothy gets kind of into like these situations, and it's usually at the end of the previous book where you find out like you kind of get an idea of where the next book's gonna go. So this one is he gets recruited by a different government agency than one he was working with. Like he starts at the FBI and then he gets recruited by some other agency, and there is an astronaut that is supposedly suffocates in like a training module thing, and yeah, he has to like go undercover as like in like a psych ward as a cannibal, and the doctor that is like treating him, like the therapist, doesn't believe he's really a cannibal and is like treating him as someone who thinks they're a cannibal. It's very, I wouldn't say, I guess campy would be the word to describe it. He gets himself into these situations and you're just like, why? Like your luck can't be that terrible. But it is. And he like loses body parts throughout the series, and I got a little bit worried in this book that he was gonna lose something else. Like it was wild. It's so fun. I really recommend it. I'm trying to get a hard copy of this book, but it's so expensive. It's like $36 for the paperback copy on Amazon. So I have the other 3 in a physical copy, but this one is the one I'm still trying to like get a hold of. So I ended up giving this one, did I give it 4 stars, I think? Yeah, I gave this one 4 stars. I don't remember what I gave the other books. I think I gave Hideout 5 stars, which is book 3. But none of them I don't think were under 4 stars. They're so entertaining and so fun. Okay, so the next book is the one I DNF'd, and that is Feral by James DeMonico and B.K. Evanson. This is a horror under the Blumhouse Books publisher. Now, if you're horror fans or watch any horror movie, Blumhouse is a horror production company. So I was like, okay, I'll give it a try. So basically it's about an airborne pathogen is released by accident from a chemical company in like this town, and it starts mutating the genes of the men, and it makes them feral. So like all the women have to like band together and like protect themselves against these rabid men. And I don't know if that's like a euphemism for something, like the whole book is like a euphemism or a metaphor or whatever, or like a whole big feminist uprising. I don't know, but I DNF'd this because there was too many points of view that I was kind of like, is there a reason for this? Like it didn't really make any sense to me why we were getting points of view. Like, so our heroine is Allie. Allie is the main protagonist. So you'll get chapters from her first person point of view, but then you'll get chapters still following her, but it's in third person. And I'm like, why are we omniscient and then like first person? Like it's so weird. Or third person omniscient and then like first person, like it was really weird. And then you were getting chapters from like her sister, like one chapter from her sister, a chapter from one of the other women at the compound where she's staying, a chapter from the doctor that's trying to find like an a cure for this disease that spread. It was just really weird. There was a lot I can understand the doctor and I can understand like Allie's point of view, but like getting the third person and then these other random ones was kind of weird to me. And there was a lot of like jumping around, and I was kind of like it was a little bit just annoying to follow for the most part, and I was getting kind of bored with it, to be honest. And I realized I was just reading it because it was a book picked through a poll, because I did do the Read Every Day challenge for the American Cancer Society in October, and this was the book that was picked for that week. So I was reading it for that, but not, I ended up having to just give up and move on with the rest of my month. Then the week after that, I picked up finally City of Ghosts by Victoria Schwab. I actually found this on audio on Hoopla, and I gave this 5 stars. It was really good. I understand it's middle grade. I know, I talk about it in that vlog. But I enjoyed this. It was very atmospheric. It was perfect for October spooky season. Our heroine, Cassidy, I think she's like 12 or 13. She's like like a young teen. Her parents are paranormal investigators, and I guess they wrote a book, and then their book gets picked up for like a TV show. So I don't know if I think it's each episode or each season goes through a different city. So their first city is Edinburgh, Scotland, and Cassidy, even though her parents are paranormal investigators, Cassidy actually can see ghosts because she had an incident when she was, I think it was a year prior to this first book, where she nearly drowns, and her near-death experience has given her the ability to see and speak to ghosts, and also travel within the veil of life and death and stuff like that. And she has a ghost like best friend who like is attached to her, essentially is haunting her. This one in Edinburgh, there is a like evil spirit that is trying to get hold of a human, like their soul, to put into their deceased body to come back to life. So that is kind of like the villain in this. It's very tropey, predictable. It is middle grade, like I said, but it was so fun. I really had a good time enjoying it, and the narrator was fantastic. I really, really liked it. Then after that, I listened to book 2 in that series, which is City of Bones. This one is City of Bones? No. Tunnel of Bones. City of Bones. City of Bones is Cassandra Clare. Tunnel of Bones, where we move from Edinburgh to Paris, France, and the catacombs. And this one we have a poltergeist is the ghost of the book. A young boy poltergeist who died in the catacombs. And yeah, it's really interesting. And then at the end of this one, we meet an very like dark. It gets a little bit darker in this one. And then I gave this one 5 stars as well. Sorry, I'm kind of like jumping all over the place, but like I read the series back to back to back as a whole, this trilogy. So I gave this one 5 stars, and then I went on to book 3, which was Bridge of Souls, and this one we go to New Orleans. And now we have an emissary of death who we kind of meet at the end of book 2. This emissary of death is our primary villain in this book, and he's trying essentially to reverse what happened with Cassidy surviving her near-death experience, because she's traveling, bouncing back and forth between the living and the dead, like the ghost world, the veil. It's kind of messing with the flow of things, and he's there to put a stop to it and to take it back. So she has to prevent that from happening, and it causes a rift between her and Jacob, her ghost friend. And it's really fun. You meet a lot of people that are... New Orleans is everyone's very open to the paranormal and ghosts and that kind of stuff in a city like that. So you meet a lot of like interesting characters with like the use of voodoo and that kind of stuff. There's a secret society involved, which is really fun. Again, it's still like, it's short. They're short. Everything happens very quickly. These audiobooks were 5 hours about, so I listened to them also very quickly because I listened at over 2 times speed. So I flew through these books, but I had a really fun time with them, and I'm glad I finally got... City of Ghosts has been sitting on my bookshelves for a few years now, so I'm glad I finally got to listen to them and get them off my TBR, and they were fun. Oh, and I gave Bridge of Souls 4 stars. I think I said that. If not, there you go. And then the final book I read for October is a novella, and that was the second of the Gypsy Brothers series by Lily St. Germain, which is 6 brothers. I gave this one 5 stars. This series is crazy. I say this all the time. This series is actually a spin-off from Cartel by Lily St. Germain. The heroine in Gypsy Brothers, we see her a little bit younger. In that first series, her father is one of the love interests of the protagonist in that series, and there's something that happens at the end of that series. I don't really want to spoil it. I don't know if I have in other videos. If I have, I'm sorry. Oops. But there is something that happens at the end of that series that jump starts this series. So the I can't remember her name. They call her Sammy, but that's not her real name. Juliet is her name. Juliet is it's a few years later. She is harmed at the end of that book, nearly to the point of death. And so she heals, and as she's healing, she starts to get these urges for revenge, and she starts planning and plotting, because it was father and his group of sons that did this horrible thing to her and her family, and she wants revenge. So she's on a revenge quest, and that's what this series is. There are, I think, 6 brothers. There are 7 novellas as far as I know. So each person gets a book and it just progresses. So you get, I have not read, I compare it to Mindfuck, even though I have not read Mindfuck, but I think it's a similar idea. It's crazy. It's a good time. Again, they're really short. They're like 120 some pages long. I'm surprised I actually haven't sat and just read them straight through, but I've been reading other stuff in between. So, but it's just wild. So far I've only read the first 2, and just the way, I want to know what goes on in Lily St. Germain's head, because the way this girl is killing these guys, I'm like, how would you think of something like that? Especially in this last book, like she nearly kills herself so she doesn't look guilty or at fault for what she does to the guy when she kills him. And I'm just like, oh my God. And like she nearly dies in the process. And I'm just like, what is happening? Like this whole series is wild. And it's just so addicting. And it's very, very dark. Cartel especially is very, very dark. But I would recommend reading Cartel first if you want to read this series. Or at least look up triggers. If you don't like the triggers, look up spoilers, I guess, for that series so you know what happens going into this one. Because there's a lot of backstory and detail in that first series that I think you would need to get into this one. It would make more sense to you. It would be more beneficial, I should say. You get more. But Cartel, I did have the audios on Hoopla. This Gypsy Brothers series, I did not. But again, it's on KU. So just, if you're at all interested, I highly recommend it. But yeah, so those are the 9 books and the 1 DNF that I read in October. Let me know how you guys did for October, what your favorite books were. Did you read anything spooky? I read quite a few that I was really happy about, but there were some that I didn't quite get to that I was a little bit disappointed about. Hopefully, maybe I'll continue in spooky season in November. If not, they'll probably end up having to stay out till next year. But that's okay. Anyway, that's going to be it for me today, guys. I will see you in my next one. Bye.